Hello, Internet. I'm Jackie Fox. Welcome to Politically Non-Binary. I don't think I've ever really made an episode to say I told you so, but in light of recent news, I did. I did tell you so. And, well, maybe now people will start taking some of the things that I've said and some of the things that I've been saying a bit more seriously. Because now that there's, worldwide evidence of exactly the type of thing that I was talking about being revealed by not only Meta, but also OpenAI. But before we get to that, we're going to take a trip through the US political intrigue system, first talking about a couple of infamous journalists before looking at multiple state-backed espionage and political influence organizations. Before landing in Israel to take a look at a PR company, or two, that have found themselves in the middle of the war on Gaza, at least on social media. There is one unifying thread to this story, which I'm not going to mention yet. But let's get started with what's probably the most politically non-binary part of this, and something that I feel is like a real blind spot for the left, and kind of for a good reason, but I'll explain. When I referenced the Twitter files in my previous episode about the death of the internet, I want to point out that I was specifically referencing the reporting that was done by Ken Klippenstein. Now, there were a lot of reporters that ended up doing work on the Twitter files at some point, and there were a lot of different installments of them that were largely ignored after the first couple. And on its surface, this was just largely Elon Musk running the usual PR and letting journalists come to him to do his dirty work. And I think that's how a lot of the people on the left characterize this generally, and not for no reason. And honestly, I have a little bit of trepidation following Ken Klippenstein at the moment because he's recently left The Intercept. Honestly, I respect The Intercept as a news organization. I respect its editors. And I've seen a pattern recently where a lot of journalists that I have respected that have worked for major companies have gone rogue and then gotten pretty incredibly cringy with these sudden heel turns to the right. Probably the best example of this is really the star figure that ruined the Twitter files' credibility in basically everyone's eyes, and that also happens to be a journalist who fits this exact profile. The Twitter files affiliated journalist I just described is Matt Taibbi. Sorry. How I've never gotten his name wrong in my life. Not many times have I said it, but when I became familiar with him, he was still working for the Rolling Stone. He put out some really long, intricate investigative journalist think pieces, and I think he's just an entertaining person to read. I found him really inspiring for a time, and I think that he still maintains an engaging writing style, though I suppose I haven't read him in print since his Rolling Stones days. And at that point, he was doing good work. But like Ken, he seemed to have some so-called creative differences with his company, which already was letting him do some pretty, risque and out there stuff. Like, what was the editorial staff of the Rolling Stone really shooting down? And, after that, he went independent, and frankly, if what we got next was any indication, I think he really needed that editor to rein him in. One of his first big moves of independence was making this deal with Elon Musk to release his cherry-picked information. And there were certain parts of the Twitter files that Elon Musk wanted to get out, and there were certain parts where journalists like Ken himself just kind of had access, like maybe even an improper amount of access to the data behind Twitter systems that was given to them by Elon Musk, and they were allowed to look around for a story they wanted to cover. And let's just say Matt Taibbi did a really bad job of fumbling the ball on the first installment of the Twitter files. Largely, the reputation of the Twitter files never recovered. And even though there were some good points that he made within it, they ultimately got lost within obfuscation and bullshit and just really bad data. I mean, he really got owned by Mehdi Hassan and just couldn't back up basically anything. I mean, to a certain degree, I think Mehdi just did his research and kind of bullied Matt here, but at the same time, Matt, you're a journalist. You should be able to do better than this. Come on, man. I believed in you. But Ken Klippenstein's reporting showed me the shape of international influence operations and how they operate on social media to the point where I was able to fill that out and describe it in my previous video. Sadly, though, after a lot of trying, I still haven't been able to rediscover that particular reporting that Ken Klippenstein did for and about the Twitter files to cite for this video. I don't know, it feels like lost media, or I'm just really bad at operating Google. But now we have further confirmation that these state-run influence networks not only happen on Twitter, or X, or whatever, but actually this seems to be a universal problem for social media and kind of the internet in general, and that's definitely troubling. If anything about this so far has made you think that Twitter isn't especially good at stopping these state-level actors from infiltrating their platform, I don't think you've been listening, but after all, they did indirectly blow the whistle on this behavior through Ken Klippenstein. Well, when we later talk about the organization Stoic, that's been doing PR for Israel in the United States as well as other countries, you should know that Stoic has been banned on most social media platforms. Currently, with the exception of X, or at least at certain points in which this reporting was done. All of it's within the last month, so maybe they banned it recently, maybe they banned it since writing and publication of this video, but there was definitely a time where Meta did and they didn't, at the very least. Oh yeah, they're doing a particularly bad job of keeping you safe from disinformation. But just to add insult to injury, this isn't even well-crafted misinformation, y'all. This is not a particularly sophisticated operation in some respects, even though it does have quite a bit of scale. I mean, it is, in a way, only because of its complexity and size to add to that researchers seem to keep uncovering more and more parts of these networks, even having to reassess their own conclusions about the successfulness of operations like the ones performed by Stoic. As it turns out, one of the things that made this relatively easy to detect on social media compared to some previous forms of intelligence operations like this is that it looks like a lot of the actors here were pretty uniformly using ChatGPT to write their responses, at least in many cases, for their botnet swarms that were peddling this misinformation that particularly helped whatever state agency they happen to be working for, and there are a number of different examples of this from a lot of people that you would expect, like Iran, China, Russia. In fact, let's focus on Russia for a second. I'm pretty sure everyone remembers what happened in 2016. And exactly how fast and for how long the media was just like way up Russia's butt about the fact that they were trying to influence our political elections in 2016. Here's the thing though, I don't see that reaction happening here with this information. I mean, specifically, I don't see Israel getting called out here, and maybe that'll become a bit more clear as to why later as we keep going into this video. But let's first look at the reporting on these multiple state-level threat actors. Around the end of May, OpenAI revealed that several of its power users for ChatGPT and DALL-E during 2023 and to the present were using it to pump out political disinformation and propaganda, which they seemed to be spreading online. This included 5 covert influence operations originating in China, Russia, Iran, and Israel, saying this about their collective intentions. They attempted to manipulate public opinion and influence political outcomes without revealing their true identities or intentions. OpenAI's report on covert influence operations, which I'll link below as it seems to be the source of like half of the articles I read are referencing, that's a real doozy. The report tells us that they're on their threat scale of 1 to 6 that these folks were only at 2. Meaning that their usage of AI-generated text and images was having trouble generating authentic audiences. I mean, it did seem to have an audience, but that audience was also other bots within its network. And they weren't really good at getting this into the algorithm either. At least, that's what OpenAI says. Of course, this wasn't the full extent of the influence of these networks. In the case of Russia, they actually uncovered 2 different groups using its service to create propaganda and disinformation. And in none of these cases does it seem that AI-generated content was the full extent of their operations. And we'll talk a bit more about their authentic operations when we get into talking about the single private company that they detected in this batch, Stoic. tactics and use cases for each organization was different, and ultimately each group used ChatGPT for a number of different reasons and functions. The Russian outfit Bad Grammar used their models to generate large quantities of short comments that were posted across Telegram, X, Instagram, and other sites. People acting on behalf of the IUVM out of Iran used their models to generate and proofread longer articles in English and in French, which they weren't fluent in. Spamiflage from China and Doppelganger, which was also from Russia, used their models for both quality and quantity, correcting grammatical errors but also creating dozens of short comments in a range of languages. OpenAI continues, "We identified Spamiflage accounts on X that posted comments generated using our models. The same accounts interspersed these comments with content that appeared to have been written by humans who were not using their native language. Similarly, Doppelganger posted AI-generated comments on non-gag run alongside a range of memes, some of which were years old and appear to have been copied from across the internet. This was not a case of giving up on human generation and shifting to AI, but mixing of the two. Spamiflage posted short comments on X criticizing Chinese dissident Kaisha. I'll put it on the screen because I'm probably mispronouncing that. These took the form of an initial post and a series of replies. Every comment in the conversation was artificially generated using our models, likely to create the false impression that real people were engaged with the operation's content. Russian outfit, nicknamed Bad Grammar by researchers, operated mainly on Telegram and English language posts with, well, bad grammar. The other Russian outfit, Doppelganger, posted mostly anti-Ukrainian content to X and 9gag. The Chinese op, Spamiflage, targeted mainly members of the Chinese diaspora with pro-Chinese propaganda in Chinese, English, Japanese, and Korean. This one seemed to have operated on the largest variety of platforms. The Iranian influence operation known as the International Union of Virtual Media made posts mainly in English and in French, but posted mainly to their own website, as the FBI actually took down their last one. Their content was typically anti-US and anti-Israel and praised the Palestinians, Iran, and what they call the Axis of Resistance. And then there's Stoic. Stoic is a political campaign management firm based in Tel Aviv, Israel. According to OpenAI, Stoic used our models to generate large quantities of short comments that were then posted across Telegram, X, Instagram, and other sites, which also includes YouTube as well as their own purpose-built propaganda sites. Stoic posted short texts on specific themes, especially the Gaza conflict, on Instagram and X. These texts were generated using our models. A further set of accounts on these platforms would then reply with comments that are also generated by this operation. It targeted Americans, fellow Israelis, and Canadians, as well as people living in India and Ghana, primarily with content in both English and Hebrew. In Canada and the US, we'll get there. This one gets especially wild. They also use their fake accounts to create what appeared to be organic special interest groups, but were primarily just Stoic spam posting. Other content appeared on four websites that posed as activist groups focused on the Gaza conflict and broader issues of relations between individuals of the Jewish and Muslim faith. In addition to ChatGPT, they also seem to have used another type of AI called a general adversarial model to generate its fake profile pictures. They didn't confirm this, but I'm pretty sure thispersondoesnotexist.com is a GAN, so it could have been that, but that's just me speculating. Open source research in February described this network criticizing the UN relief agency in Palestine, UNRWA. The DFR Lab report in March highlighted content that focused on Canada and criticized what the campaign's post described as radical Islamists there. A further cluster focused on universities in the United States and accused pro-Palestinian protesters of promoting anti-Semitism and terrorism. A fourth cluster focused on Qatar, portraying its investments in the US as a threat to the American way of life. A fifth cluster generated social media posts in Hebrew. These typically praise the Histadrut trade union organization and its leadership. Finally, in May, the network began generating comments that focused on India, criticizing the ruling BJP party and praising the oppositional Congress party. There's also a little bit more information on their work in Ghana as well, but that wasn't mentioned by OpenAI here. But OpenAI wasn't the first group that noticed Stoic's operation. Meta's researchers uncovered 510 Facebook accounts, 11 pages, and 32 Instagram accounts, and one group that were tied to the effort, including fake and previously hacked accounts. These accounts posed as Jewish students, African Americans, and concerned citizens, and shared posts that praised Israel's military actions and criticized the the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, and the college protests. They also shared Islamophobic content in Canada, saying that radical Islam poses a threat to liberal values in Canada. According to a report by the New York Times, the Israeli government organized and funded a clandestine influence campaign last year aimed at swaying American lawmakers and public sentiment in favor of Israel's actions during the war in Gaza. Officials involved in the effort and related documents confirm these details, the report claims. The covert operation was, according to the Times, commissioned by Israel's Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, which allocated approximately $2 million and hired Stoic, a political marketing company based in Tel Aviv, to execute it. Commencing in October and still active on the platform X, as of the time that this particular article was written, the campaign employed hundreds of fictitious accounts masquerading as real Americans on X, Facebook, and Instagram to post pro-Israel comments. The accounts targeted more than a dozen members of Congress with a focus on Black and Democratic representatives such as Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader from New York, and Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia. These posts urge these lawmakers to continue funding Israel's military efforts against Gaza. While the Israeli Ministry of Diaspora Affairs denied involvement and claimed no connection to Stoic, the Times reported that 4 current and former ministry members confirmed the government's role in the campaign. Stoic did not respond to requests for comment. Robust, complex commercial ecosystems of firms that carry out influence operations has in recent years emerged in Israel, a development that allows state clients to maintain a measure of plausible deniability between themselves and the propaganda operations they distribute, experts say. Often founded by former Israeli military officers, these companies operate in a gray zone where they advertise the technological capabilities of an influence for hire operation without spelling it out. While authoritarian governments in the Middle East and other regions get plenty of scrutiny from Western media for their influence operations, these governments are often tapping on expertise from US and European companies to conceive and carry out specific campaigns. Let's take a brief diversion to look at yet another Israeli influence campaign, Team Jorge. Using dubious methods, this Israeli consultant still goes by the same pseudonym and continues to sell his influence and manipulation campaigns to the highest bidder. His tools, though, have since adapted to the latest technological developments. Artificial intelligence now writes on-demand viral posts, and the remote hacking of Telegram accounts has enriched his catalog of services. In the summer of 2022, a potential client presenting himself as a representative for African leader hoping to postpone or even cancel an election asked Jorge for a demonstration. The job, Jorge told him, would cost some 6 million euros. During several Zoom discussions, Jorge maintained his anonymity. What Jorge didn't know was that the man on his screen was not an intermediary, nor did he work in Africa. He was, in fact, a journalist from Radio France and was soon joined by colleagues from The Marker and Haaretz. This method presented an otherwise impossible opportunity to discuss Jorge's manipulation services, mainly intelligence and influence, he said, and attend live demonstrations. Apart from the technological capabilities Jorge presented, he explained how to build a narrative, which could then propagate with an impressive range of services, bot networks, false information, and even hacking of opponents. Jorge boasted of having used such tactics on 33 presidential campaigns, 27 of which were successful, a claim that is obviously very difficult to verify. Jorge did not reveal any details about his clients, preferring instead to demonstrate his impressive range of services. He eventually divulged information on secret operations, including one that had provoked a media storm in France. Earlier this month, the French press disclosed the existence of an internal investigation at BFM TV, a popular television channel, after one of its most prominent figures, Rachid Embarki, probably mispronouncing that, but I'm trying, allegedly broadcast unverified content. What the French press didn't know was that Jorge, a loquacious salesman, was simultaneously bragging to undercover journalists in his office in Modin, Israel, that he could get his stories placed on French television. To prove his point, he pulled up an excerpt of a report broadcast on BFM TV in December of 2022. The European Union announces a new set of sanctions against Russia, it reads, adding that the sanctions make yacht builders in Monaco fear the worst, and that the freezing of assets of oligarchs puts their sector in great difficulty. The text of this brief broadcast, not in keeping with the channel's editorial line, was read by Embarki at midnight. In addition to have journalists on his payroll, Jorge also explained that he could spread stories using an army of avatars, hosted in and run with an online platform. Forbidden Stories and its partners subsequently verified the existence of these fake accounts. This tool, not searchable on the web, is called AIMS, Advanced Impact Media Solutions. And here's a video of that from the inside from Haaretz. As early as 2017, Jorge had offered Cambridge Analytica a semi-auto avatar creation and network deployment system, accompanied by a demo video illustrating how simple it was to create avatars on a platform that allowed for the seamless navigation from one account to the other. In 2022, Jorge had a catalog of more than 30,000 automated profiles of virtual people with real accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Amazon, and even Bitcoin. Jorge used these fake accounts to post a flurry of comments on social media networks, stir up controversy, and even purchase sex toys on Amazon. Jorge recounted how one pretty blonde-haired avatar named Shannon Aiken used an Amazon account to order sex toys to the house of a political rival of one of his clients, using the rival's candidate's wife to believe that he had been unfaithful. After that, the story was leaked and he couldn't go home. The campaign turned around, Jorge says. Jorge, who has numerous verified exploits, according to reporting on the organization's efforts. While Jorge is using AI like ChatGPT for its online influence campaigns just like all the rest, this is far more than just PR and propaganda. This is a network of hackers and backroom deal makers. Frankly, I should have made this video about them specifically, as they're far more scary and moreover successful than the other examples I've mentioned so far. For another example of their exploits before I move on, in California it emerged the army of avatars had attacked Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom when he considered not renewing the operating license of a nuclear plant amid safety issue concerns. The governor finally gave the go-ahead in September of 2022, and Jorge's avatars finally backed off. In this case, it's only one view here that actually matters: Gavin's. It might be hard to change public sentiment, but social media opens up governors to the masses, and with it, the masses of inauthentic bots trying to blend in with them. Well, I would say that OpenAI's methods of tracking Stoic's influence fail a bit, as the types of narrative they're spreading on X in America about campus protests are, if nothing else, raising the profile of this topic in the algorithm due to the scale of their efforts alone. Also, it's not uncommon for low engagement posts to be sampled by articles in the media that massively inflates their ideological penetration while not actually contributing to their views back on X. I mean, like specifically, people really like to screenshot tweets for like dozens and dozens of tweets to back up their Medium articles or whatever. Screenshots go viral too, and this sentiment has run rampant in America, egged on by a disingenuous media that samples things like this, like their dogma, and in turn ends up doing the work of companies like Stoic with far more competence and media savvy. But since Stoic 2 has been targeting individuals as they have been with US Congress people, does their engagement really matter to the individual targeted? Does it matter that no one saw that tweet or liked that comment? The fact that it was left is still going to be something that they have to grapple with before they fall asleep at night. And that can mean a lot, even if it's just one view. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and especially if this is the first time you've heard about some of these groups, then definitely like and subscribe. I'm going to be bringing more stuff like this in the future. This has been really interesting to talk about, and it's so like, it's a lot, man. These, especially reading about Jorge was almost a little scary. But with all that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. You can like and subscribe. There's also a link in the description if you want to see this episode as a podcast, or if you just want to check out my podcast in general. I usually post the posts from this channel as podcasts. But you can also check out my other channels and see the other places I post online, as well as checking out my books and being able to even find ways to donate to the channel if you didn't want to purchase a book, or donate and purchase a book. I'm not opposed to that either. Whether you like a more science fiction, like I have a series that was based on a series of D&D style campaigns, tabletop campaigns I did with some friends. That starts with the book Athena's Chosen. There'll be a link for that in the description. But also, if you're more into this type of stuff, like we were talking about in the video, there's also a series that I'm currently writing that starts with It Even Happens While We Sleep, that builds up to national level, like both government and corporate interventions, and like it just builds up to that scale, and talking about big data and corporations, AI, and this type of technology in the same way that I have in this video, but within a narrative set in a slightly distinct version of the early 2020s that is just a little bit more advanced than we are now, but also dealing with some of the same things that we were dealing with back then. It's a really weird way to look at our past, but I think it's kind of an interesting alternate history of what this decade could have been like. So if you want to check any of that out, check that out in the description. The Linktree link will link you to all of it. And with all that being said, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.